Good evening, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Welcome to another episode of Critique Corner with me, Daniel Parker.
And me, DB Fastbinder. And I'm a little confused. Did YouTube institute a new on hold music, or did you choose that one?
No, it's new. Yeah, yeah, I was surprised by that too. I'm like, it's very, what do I want to call it? Very, very soothing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as opposed to that dun 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 dun. It's always like vaguely intense.
Yeah. This one was a little more mellow. It's almost like a Peruvian flute band.
Yes. Which tells us we need to get ramped up. Critique corner.
Yes,
Yeah.
sure, yeah. If you're returning, welcome back. If you're new, what we always do is we review stuff, we critique stuff. We usually something new or contemporary, something older and classic, and then we'll also do some review some solo things that we've been watching on our own. And we have a kind of a nice little lineup here for you all. And tonight we're starting with a little animated indie movie from France, I believe.
It's a mix of France, Latvia, and Belgium.
Yes.
Where I
So,
believe that Latvia is the main, or at least a main source of it.
okay, yeah, yes, and that movie is Flow.
Yes, which is currently available on HBO Max, or excuse me, Max.
It just Max.
The artist formerly known as HBO Max.
Yes, yeah. Um, yeah, so this is a very unique, different kind of animated movie. One that wasn't on my radar. I didn't know anything about it until DB mentioned it, as we were looking for stuff to watch after the show last week. And yeah, it's a not your typical animated movie about cute animals who are trying to survive in a post-apocalyptic world.
Yeah, I had heard about this one. I'd watched a brief review of it on Film Threat, and I don't know how interested I was because I'm not always the biggest fan of post-apocalyptic stuff.
Yeah.
Just not my bag. But the premise of this sounded interesting, and also the fact that it was made by uh, small studio out using the free software Blender, which
Yeah.
that it was kind of interesting to see what somebody using freeware could come up with as far as a feature length movie goes.
Yeah, and I would say as far as that goes, they did a solid job. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have to dial down your expectations slightly in terms of not the animation itself, but the models of the characters, specifically the animal characters. One thing I kept noticing, and it took me a little bit to get used to this, was that okay, so we're spoiled by Pixar and to a lesser degree DreamWorks, where if Puss in Boots gets wet, you're gonna see, he's gonna be, you're gonna have proper hair physics, right?
Right. Yeah.
Um, Going back all the way to Monsters Inc. Part of why they made Monsters Inc. the way they did was because they wanted to push themselves to animate hair properly. So when Sully is moving around, all of his hairs are moving with him.
Yeah.
The animals in this one are a bit lower. I don't know what the terminology is. Lower texture, lower. Their light behaves with the animal models in an interesting way, is the way I'll
Yeah.
put it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if this is technically cell shading.
Maybe. The now that I think about it, the animation style kind of reminded me of that one Star Wars animated show. What was it called?
Oh, you mean the one that they tried to make with the sequel trilogy?
Yeah, yeah. Wasn't Rogue Squadron. It was like something along those lines. But yeah, it's very similar kind of animation style that um which you know, I think that works better with animals maybe than with humans.
Oh yeah, like you're not going to get the same sort of uncanny valley.
Yeah.
And once I kind of got used to it, I didn't really notice it very often. It was especially odd in a few places how the animals, again, how light interacted with their fur. If there was shade, I thought the animation looked a little bit better, but direct light was there were interesting things being done with how light bounced off of things. Like
Yeah.
I'll put it like this: there are a lot of secretary birds in this movie. So the secretary birds typically in this movie were mostly white with maybe like some gray splotches when they were in the direct sunlight. Secretary
Yeah.
birds, Daniel, I've shown you several pictures of them as we've talked about them.
Yeah, yeah.
They tend to have a lot more dark going on with them.
Yeah, yeah, their feathers tend to be, yeah, black. Yeah.
Yeah. Where like in this movie, the secretary bird was much more white all around.
Yeah.
But then I was like, okay, so they just are animating a different color. But then I caught the secretary bird in a shadow, and that was it's like that looks more like the usual coloring. Oh, is it just weird things happening with the model and lighting? That was
Uh,
strange.
yeah.
But okay, so we got into the animation weeds here.
Yes.
Like I said, with the dialed in expectation that this is like the I don't know Latvian Ruby
Yeah.
to an extent, very impressive.
Yes. Yeah.
And the environments are probably because the environments don't have to necessarily move that much. The environments don't have the same light oddities that the characters do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
They also apparently used some sort of plug-in for Blender. I saw it mentioned in the credits to help with the water effects,
Okay.
which makes sense because
Yeah.
they did some really elaborate water effects in this one.
Yes, there are. Yeah. Especially with the fish. Yeah.
Yeah, the fish, things jumping out of the water.
Yeah.
Um, and it feels weird to talk about this much of the production before we get into the plot, but
Yeah.
I think that's a lot of the experience of this movie because there is no like not a single line of spoken dialogue. Animals make noises. There's music.
Yeah. But yeah, most of the what would be considered dialogue is usually through body language.
Yep. So the animation is very important.
Yeah.
Also, the Foley work, the sound effects, mwah, perfect.
Yeah.
Sells the scenes. It all comes together, so you never have to guess what a character is thinking at the time, which is an
Yeah.
accomplishment for a bunch of mostly photorealistic animals. I would say, like
Yeah. Yeah.
like maybe a slightly anthropomorphized, but it's like 80-20.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. Yeah, and as far as the plot of the movie goes, it's a simple plot. I mean, like we said, it's in a set in this post-apocalyptic like forest where there are remnants of a human civilization, but there are no humans around. And we've got our main character who's a black cat, and he or she kind of acts like a typical outdoor house cat, just, roams around, kills a few birds and does whatever, and then goes back home and sleeps. It has a run in with a pack of dogs, and then but then uh, things change when the cat's home floods, and the whole area, the whole valley, and wherever they are, floods. And so the cat ends up on a boat, which is occupied by a capybara.
Capybara.
Capybara, sorry. Yeah, I couldn't know it was capybara or capybara. Capybara, yeah, which is kind of like it, folks out there, you've probably seen pictures of one and you just didn't know what it was called.
You know what? Let me. They had a poster that I that they had as an alternative to this one. Let me go. That had all the characters. One sec.
Yeah, and so then of course as the cat and the capybara are floating along, they encounter other aliens. Yeah, the capybara is there next to the golden
Yeah.
retriever.
If you don't know, basically imagine a guinea pig the size of an actual pig.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we got our cat, and then there's got our golden retriever who
He's a
really
good boy.
he's a good boy. Yeah, and he really likes the cat, but the cat's just kind of like a cat and just doesn't care.
Yeah.
And then they also meet a lemur who is like a scavenger. Um, and last but not least, we have our main secretary bird there, who during one little encounter, the his flock wanted to do something bad to the cat, but then he stands up to the head bird, and then he loses, and the head bird breaks his wing.
Yep. So he ends up hanging out with them.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah. So I
yeah,
think so. I will say one trigger warning. I know it's funny. There are people who can watch a zombie movie and not blink an eye. You show a cat in distress for 5 minutes and it's just like, oh no, 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 please save that cat. Oh,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
there's a lot of scenes where the cat almost drowns in the flooding water. There's a lot of scenes of peril, animals in pain,
yeah,
um, animals in distress. That's like the only really big caveat I would have on this one. Is like I would say this is pretty much in all ages, just because of the subject matter. Anyone can relate
yeah,
to an animal trying to escape.
yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, and then of course as they're floating along on this boat, they keep getting closer and closer to this really tall rock formation thing that looks like something out of Middle Earth.
Yeah, that was the other thing is I kept trying to figure out where this was because some of the cities kind of look like Italy, in my opinion, like
Yeah,
or some sort of Mediterranean. But then there's a bunch of these towers that almost look like enormous termite mounds,
yeah,
or maybe like something out of Southeast Asia. And also the animals are a mishmash from all around the world. But I just kind of took that as, oh, these are, some of these are feral zoo populations that got out.
oh yeah,
At least that was my head canon for how that possibly made sense.
yeah, yeah. I could see that. Yeah, yeah, and there's a fantasy element to this, which I think I kind of alluded to earlier, um,
Yes.
where it kind of doesn't really, you're not really entirely sure what's going on. Is there like some kind of like god or goddess that's like watching over them, and they're drawing them to this place, and they got to do something,
Yeah, this isn't an entirely naturalistic movie, which kept throwing me off at times because, well, the animals move pretty realistically most of the time, and then it's like, oh, right, the cat is acting kind of human right now because this is a fantasy story.
yeah,
the, the one that my biggest biology nerd uh, brain kept having to resist was they kind of portray the secretary birds in the wrong way.
yeah,
Um, by which I mean that okay, so secretary birds, mostly ground living, they can fly all right, but like that it's mostly used to escape from predators or to get up to their nests. But they're mostly ground living. They, kick small things to death and then eat them.
yeah,
Um, they in this one they're portrayed as being powerful flyers and they're catching um, they're catching fish out of the water with their talons, which is like they don't really have talons that are designed for that.
oh.
I kept thinking to myself, well, on the one hand, I like secretary birds, so it's cool that they're in the movie, but if I keep feeling like this should realistically be a heron.
Yeah,
But you know, artistic license, it is just a fantasy movie at the end of the day. And like
Yeah.
the first big hint that this is a fantasy movie is there's a whale character who is almost godlike in the way it's portrayed,
Yeah.
who he definitely is not any sort of normal whale. He has a bunch of weird tentacles and projections, and like his tail has too many flukes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, it's yeah, and the other thing too is with there's I don't know how much in the spoilers we want to get into, but like not that this movie's kind of
Um,
hard to
let's let's
spoil.
let's basically not talk about anything past when they run into the pack of dogs again,
Oh,
because I
okay.
because I think that's where like the real spoilers are at.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, one scene in particular that got me, which I thought was kind of clever, but then thinking about it, I'm like, okay, that's well, again, the fantasy element where the cat learns or figures out how to jump off the boat into the water, grab a fish, and then go back and then climb back into the boat. And he or she keeps going into the boat and grabbing getting the fish and bringing it into the boat, which I know it's meant to kind of show like, oh well, animals adapt to their surroundings so they can survive, but I don't know if a house cat like that could be able to learn how to do something like that.
Yeah, I kept trying to figure out how that was happening too. Early on, they looked like they were a lot of feral goldfish in there, so maybe they were dumb enough to not realize that the cat was trying to eat them.
Yeah,
But then like ended up being a lot more tropical fish. But
yeah.
on the flip side, the scenes of the cat catching the fish in the water were always really cool. I just kept expecting a shark to show up that never did.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But
But
yeah.
yeah, like it's definitely an experience. If you're a parent watching this with your kid, I expect to get a lot of questions about what's happening, because I could see a child me. You know how it is, like when a child is watching a movie with a parent and they don't understand something, they'll just ask the parent what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it does definitely keep your attention, just because you can't really look away at all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, if you look away for a second, you couldn't very easily miss something.
Yep. But yeah, this is a very worthy effort, a
Hmm.
beautiful movie, um, very creative and well done. Pretty simple plot, which is not a problem at all,
Yeah.
especially when you're trying to get it all through body language. Um,
Yeah.
the only people I can think of who I wouldn't recommend this for are people who just philosophically cannot deal with watching a post-apocalyptic thing. Although, in my opinion, so you do see the house that the cat is living in. There is paper still there that's intact, and like the bed that the cat sleeps on is still intact. That tells
Yeah.
me that whoever was there wasn't dead for that long or gone for that long.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you could always headcanon it as, oh well, there's no people in this area, but
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, this could be like the apocalypse is very recent too. Like in the last like
yeah,
couple of weeks or month or yeah.
right. I'm just saying that if you just cannot deal with that, that's how you could, just compartmentalize it. It's like,
Right. Yeah.
where, oh no, the humans all evacuated this area because they knew the flood was coming. But I think that would be rewriting the movie a bit too much. And then
Yeah.
again, like I said before, if you just cannot deal with the idea of an animal in distress, this is not the movie
Mm.
for you, because animals are in distress the whole time, and it's often a very sort of realistic distress. Like
Yeah.
I felt every scene where the cat almost drowned.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah.
This must have been hard to animate at times.
See, yeah, yeah. uh, yeah. But yeah, I mean it's it's I think this could also be one of those movies that people could like film school people, like real devotees of cinema could watch and pick up on like certain symbolism
Yep.
and hidden meanings to things and yeah. as you would in a European movie.
Yep. And it has been nominated for an Oscar for Best Animated Feature. And I'm trying to think of the 2024 competition. I never saw Inside Out 2 because I haven't seen Inside Out 1 yet.
Uh,
Um,
what didn't Boy and the Heron win last year?
Oscar Best Animated Film 2023. Oh, it was Pinocchio.
What? Oh, it was that not the
Guillermo del Toro's, not
yeah,
not the
yeah.
Disney live action remake.
Right. Yeah.
Oh no, that was for 2023. That's
Yeah,
right. Marcel the Shells with Shoes on was nominated in 2023. 2024 Oscar animated winner.
I want to say it was Boy and the Heron.
That's yeah, okay, it was Boy and the Heron.
Yeah.
Which honestly, that wasn't the best Studio Ghibli movie ever. I think that was probably just like, you know how it is with certain creators who when they're about to retire, they get the pity Oscar or the like, this Oscar really represents your career Oscar.
Right. Yeah.
And again, given its competition, that no. Was Puss in Boots that? No, Puss in Boots was the. If it beat Puss in Boots, I'm going to be irritated. I forget now.
Well, I know it beat Spider-Man into the whatever.
That's right. Puss in Boots was the year before.
Okay.
Puss in Boots threw me off because it came out very late in 2023.
Yeah. I remember like Spider-Verse was nominated.
Yes, it
year.
was. Yeah, it got beaten out.
Yeah, and people were really mad about that. And it's like,
no, Boy and the Heron was a better movie than Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
It was, yeah. But yeah, this movie was good too. Check it out on Max. You know, it's only 90 minutes, so
right. I mean, 90 minutes. It's not that much of a reach.
Yes. Yeah. So my solo review for the week, season 3 of Reacher. Well, I should say the first 4 episodes of Reacher, because the first 3 episodes dropped last week. I didn't have time to watch them before the show last week, but I was able to get caught up on it now, and I managed to sneak in episode 4 just before the show. So this season, one of the things about the show that I actually like is they're able to kind of do like a hybrid of being episodic and being serial. So each season is serialized. Like you have to watch one episode to understand, like the previous episode to know what's going on in the next one. But each season is episodic. So like each season is a self-contained story. So like season 1, he's in this little town in Georgia, and he's trying to find out who killed his brother. And then season 2 is where he's kind of going all over the place with members of his old Army CID unit, because other members of their unit were being killed. So he had to find out what was going on there. This season, Reacher is in Maine, and he's doing his usual wandering barbarian thing, just kind of going around, and he doesn't own anything except for the clothes on his back, his boots, and a toothbrush. That's it. And while he's in Maine, he spots an old enemy that he thought he killed, but he unfortunately didn't. And when when he runs the license plate of the car that the guy is in, or he has a member of people from his old unit run the license plate, it triggers a federal investigation, and then 3 DEA agents show up at his motel room and tell him about the fact that the car was part of an investigation into this rug company that they think are smuggling drugs. And so they basically, so Reacher, along with these 3 DEA agents, one of them is this smart talking, short-tempered Boston woman who she's got the Boston accent.
Boston.
Boston, go to the harbor. And then another agent who's an older guy who's I have a really great fear for that guy because he's really close to retirement. Yeah, so
Uh-oh. Okay,
yeah.
look, as long as he doesn't show anybody a picture of his wife.
Yeah. And then the third guy is this young rookie who the reason that they're having to be all clandestine with the investigation was because he screwed up the warrant that they were the search warrant that they had for these guys because they thought they were on a national park, but they were actually on private property. So it just so everything they got in that warrant was inadmissible, and then they got kicked off the case. But anyway, so because and by the way, Reacher doesn't get involved in stuff unless he has a personal stake in it or a personal connection to it. And this bad guy who's his name was Xavier Quinn, who's he was a lieutenant colonel who worked in Army intelligence, and he was selling military secrets to foreign powers. So he was a traitor. And we find out in the fourth episode that the reason Reacher just hates this guy so much is because he killed a woman, his partner that he was working with in a woman that he was working with in the Army CID. And so basically what ends up happening is Reacher works with the 3 DEA agents. They have this whole elaborate scheme to get him undercover with the rug company called Bizarre as in bizarre like weird, and bizarre as in shops.
I get it.
Yeah. So what they do is they kind of stage this whole attempted kidnapping on the son of the guy who owns the rug company. And the owner of the rug company is played by Anthony Michael Hall, who we saw him as a kid in 16 Candles. He was the one who was trying to get with Molly Ringwald. So they stage this kidnapping of his son because his son had actually been kidnapped before, and as a result of it, the kidnappers cut the kid's ear off, much like John Paul Getty's grandson, which that's a whole other thing. So Reacher, saves his life, saves the kid's life, saves him because it was all staged. And then he gets inside, and then of course, once he's inside, he meets one of the members of the security who's twice the size of Reacher. So if you watch the show or if you've seen the guy,
crap.
Yeah, he's huge. I mean, so Reacher's like 6'4", 6'5", weighs 240, 250. This guy he's pushing 7 feet and maybe 300 pounds. So he's huge. And I am really looking forward to that fight scene. But so far, I mean, it's paced really well. It's got a decent story, decent enough story. It's a typical Reacher story. My only like criticism of it so far has been with the new characters, specifically with the DEA agents. I mean, they're okay. But they don't really have the same like you don't have the same like connection with them that you did with like in the characters in the previous seasons, especially the second season when he's working with his old army unit people because he has camaraderie with them, so they had really great chemistry with each other and they could play off each other really well. And this one, he's just kind of like, he's an outsider, and they don't have the same kind of charm or charisma that the even the one characters from the first season, like even the first season characters had their own like quirks. But these folks, I'm kind of having a hard time like liking them.
Do you think it's more the actors or more the writing or some combination of the two?
Probably a combination of the two. I will say the Boston lady is kind of getting on my nerves.
Oh, what are you talking
What
about?
are you talking about? Yeah, she's a little much. I watched a TV show that was on back in the 2010s called Brazilian Isles. It was with Angie Harmon, and Angie Harmon had kind of the same, because it took place in Boston, so she had that kind of same Boston accent, but she wasn't. She wasn't over the top with it, and this actress, she's just like laying it on a little bit thick, yeah. But yeah, I mean, but other than that, I mean, I'm enjoying it so far, and I would say probably more of a slow burn than the other seasons. But I mean, obviously it's 4 episodes in. I think there are like 10 or 12 episodes in the season. So, just once it gets to like the last couple of episodes, that's usually where it really kicks up.
So far you're enjoying your ride.
Yes, I am. Yeah, so far, yeah.
Well, that's good, because what a brave new world we live in.
Oh, you remember a few weeks back when you were teasing me about watching Star Trek Section 31, and you're like, why are you putting yourself through that? Well, TV, why did you put yourself through this?
Well, honestly, it was a thing to do with my dad.
Oh, okay.
And what's interesting is so we're talking, of course, about Captain America: Brave New World, aka Captain America 4, aka the first Sam Wilson Cap movie, and based on the box office so far, probably the only solo movie with Sam Wilson as Cap.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and probably could mark the beginning of the end for the franchise.
Honestly, the beginning of the end of the franchise has been upon us for a while now.
Yeah, that's true.
Because I think that the real end of it was Ant-Man 3, because that was the first one that really came out where you couldn't even pretend it was pandemic issues that were causing a lower box office.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You couldn't use that as an excuse.
Right. The world had opened back up. If people wanted to see a movie, they would see a movie, as proven by the third Tom Holland Spider-Man movie making just shy of $2 billion.
Yeah.
So, and so a couple years back, I ended up watching just about the entirety of the end of the DC Snyderverse.
Yeah.
The only one I didn't catch in theaters was Shazam, which is honestly the worst of them. Shazam 2, I should say.
Oh yeah, that one was awful. Yeah, we didn't give it a very good review, as I recall.
No, we did not. But I ended up watching Flash and Blue Beetle and Aquaman 2. I would watch all three of those ahead of this one.
Oh. And I've seen The Flash.
Yeah, I think I had a slightly more positive take on The Flash than you did, but this movie has similar sorts of problems. Because, okay, so the problem with Sam Wilson Cap is the same problem that they had when they tried this in the comics 10 years ago, coincidentally after Disney bought them.
Oh.
And I've had people tell me that I've had people endorse this theory. I've had people tell me that Disney doesn't care enough about the comics to do this, but I firmly believe that all new, all different Marvel was them basically going, okay, we're a few years into this whole Avengers thing. We're making a lot of money with every movie, but eventually Robert Downey Jr. is going to get old. So we need a plan B to get a new cast of characters going.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they cast Anthony Mackie, who I actually am not sure how old he is. Like, he isn't terribly old. Like, I don't know if he's younger or older than Chris Evans.
I think he might be around the same age as Chris Evans. Now that I think about it.
Oh, then so much for getting a younger face. But
yeah.
but anyway, I think the whole theory was that, okay, we're going to need to eventually have new versions of the characters that we can slot into the movies and to keep the movies going once the actors inevitably burn out.
Yeah.
A reasonable plan.
Yeah.
The problem is that Marvel characters have never really been mantles. Like the DC, because they had the Golden Age characters and they had the break in between with a lot of them, and then they brought in like the 50s sci-fi influenced versions of Green Lantern and the Flash and whatnot.
Yeah.
DC has always had more of a superhero identity is a mantle that can be passed on to another person. That's the only Marvel hero that really has that of any sort of prominence is Ant-Man, and any sort of prominence with Ant-Man is like stretching it.
Yeah, he's very much a C-list hero.
He is one of those characters who is fine as a component of the Avengers, but you wouldn't really feel the need to watch him and the Wasp have solo monthly adventures.
Yeah. I don't see a whole lot of young people, youngins, going, oh, the new Ant-Man is coming out this month. I gotta get the new issue of Ant-Man.
Yeah, no, there's a reason they folded them into the Avengers right quick in the 60s.
Yeah.
But
hey Ninja, good to see you.
Hey Ninja. So the thing with Anthony Mackie is, and it's also when they tried this in the comics, apparently, and I didn't really read a lot of these issues, but apparently early on, they saw Sam Wilson taking a different approach as being Captain America and having a bit of personality with it.
Yeah.
Because in the comics, they actually had the same thing happen that they had in Endgame, which was just that Cap was aged into what his natural age would have been.
Mm.
So Sam Wilson took over as Cap for a bit.
Yeah.
But like early on, they had some ideas for him, and then they just turned him into Super Obama, which, in the sense, like just lots of lectures and that. Like this wasn't in the comics, but you got to do better, Senator.
Yeah,
that exact tone of voice.
Yeah,
I became the only thing anybody remembers from that TV show.
Yeah, or maybe Zemo's dancing.
Oh God,
yeah,
there's a dead meme memory resurfaced.
Yeah.
But speaking of,
yes.
So I'm in good company with this state. I never watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but the creator of Metal Gear Solid,
Kojima,
Hideo Kojima did one of basically if Hideo Kojima reviews your movie on Twitter and his only response is, "I saw this movie," he's trying very hard not to say anything mean.
Yeah.
In this case, he said he actually had more to say. He vaguely remembered Falcon getting the shield at the end of Endgame, but he was unaware of when he had actually become Captain America. And he said, was it because I didn't watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier? Which means that, yes, it is another Marvel movie that required you to watch homework.
Yes. Yeah. Much like WandaVision with Doctor Strange Multiverse.
And much like that one, and I don't know what it is with modern Disney, with these franchise shows, where it's like, if you're watching a TV show for Star Wars or Marvel, there is a 50 to 75% chance that the show is not really about the title character. Like, the Boba Fett TV show. He is like 2 episodes of it are just Mandalorian because they said, well, we got to bring in the eyeball somehow.
Yeah.
And this is kind of uninspiring. What if we just put these in there?
Yeah, same with Obi-Wan. Yeah, the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. Like Obi-Wan's really not in that much.
Right. Um, this is secretly the Incredible Hulk 2 mixed with a continuation of the Eternals.
Man. Yeah, Ninja. There's just look on like Google or YouTube or whatever. You'll see the clip of it. It's very goofy.
I was
But
asking about the dancing.
the dancing, yeah.
Yeah. So this movie the movie kind of struggles because, all right, I feel like a lot of people who have been cutting into this movie have felt the need to say, I loved Anthony Mackie as the Falcon.
Mm,
Anthony Mackie as the Falcon was a totally serviceable supporting character, but not even necessarily as charismatic as the Falcon was in the comics.
ooh. Yeah, I've noticed that with Anthony Mackie. Like, I mean, he's a decent enough actor, but he doesn't have that leading man energy.
My mom, who did not see the movie with us,
Yeah,
when my dad and I both got out of this and said it was just kind of okay,
yeah,
and my dad said it was just kind of okay when he had positive, like he came out of the Flash thinking it was mostly a positive experience for him.
yeah,
And my mom, when we mentioned this, said, "Yeah, he really doesn't look much like a Captain America, does he? He has a very slim body." Like,
yeah,
this is a woman who hadn't even seen the movie, and she identified part of the problem.
yeah. Ooh. Yeah. No, yeah, not what you want to have with your $400 million movie.
Yeah, or whatever budget they admit to.
Yeah.
So, overall, this doesn't work, and I don't necessarily feel the need to get into the blow by blow of the plot because this movie's been out for 2 weeks. If you cared,
Mm,
you've seen it, uh, and you've watched The Critical Drinker or Nerdrotic or some of the pro Marvel channels break it down.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, what I will say about it is that, um, uh, so what I'll just say is that large parts of this movie are ingredients that were just underdeveloped.
Mm.
Like, and part of the problem was that The Incredible Hulk came out in what, 2008, 2007,
2009, I think.
2009,
2008, 2009.
2008. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
The plot line where Thunderbolt Ross has had Sam Stearns, the leader, under lock and key, making him super weapons all these years, and but like the leader going along with it, because he knows he'll eventually get his freedom. At year like 5, you might start thinking to yourself, is Thaddeus Ross going to like go along with his part of the deal?
Yeah.
When your stay in this secret prison, if it was a child, would be talking about where's going to college and getting its driver's license.
Yeah.
Are you really a super genius if it hasn't occurred to you that maybe you should have tried to get yourself out by now?
Yeah. But no, you wait 15 years or however long it is.
Because the deal was that once Thaddeus Ross became president, he would let him go, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
This is what happens when you neglect a subplot for too long.
Yeah. Yeah.
It becomes like at a certain point, nobody is in the right. Because like on the one hand, Thunderbolt Ross, jerk for keeping the leader under lock and key, making him super weapons all this time.
Yeah.
Although in this movie, there's like no evidence of any super weapons being made, which is kind of funny. Considering that like the human military is using like entirely ordinary F-18s. The soldiers, when he goes Red Hulk, which is not a spoiler because it's on the trailer, they're
Yeah.
using worse weapons than they had in the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, and Ninja brings up a good point here. Those weapons done by the leader would have been great against the aliens that attacked Earth multiple times, or when Ultron tried to destroy the world.
Yeah, it's like it was a spotlight they only thought of 5 years ago when they started working on this movie seriously.
Yeah.
I feel like there is an element of this movie that you can enjoy, which honestly is Harrison Ford as Thunderbolt Ross.
Mm.
Here's the thing: I know that this is a role that Harrison Ford, like, apparently, I want to say he signed up for it while he was filming Indy 5 as like a favor because was it William Hurt died?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and you get the impression that partway through this, he realized that this was a ridiculous thing he was being asked to do. Like, why am I here? And I want to say that I don't know if it was this movie, but he was being asked about the filming process. Like, he was griping about, but then he went, "That's what the money's for."
Yeah.
So even like there were a couple of line deliveries where it's just like, this is ridiculous, and I have no idea what I'm talking about as I'm describing adamantium,
Oh, yeah.
or I'm not, or as I'm describing the celestial that stuck out of the Indian Ocean halfway hatched.
Oh, yeah.
He still carries this movie. Like he actually has a character arc.
Yeah.
Anthony Mackie is just kind of there, like he's hero man. He's
Yeah.
along for the ride because he's trying to help his friend, the Tuskegee experiment Captain America introduced in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, who is accused of attempting to assassinate the President Ross.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I forgot about him.
He is one of those characters who, how to put it? Okay, so in any sort of cinematic or comic book or other shared universe, there are things that once you introduce them, forever tarnish anything else you could do in that universe.
Yeah.
Like I'll give another Marvel Comics example. By the fifth or sixth time you're uncovering a secret experiment or shame or past sin in Professor X that you're having to deal with in the present, he stops being a fundamentally good man who had feet of clay in some moment of pressure, and you realize he's just a jerk who stumbled into a positive philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isaiah the Tuskegee experiment Captain America is one of those elements where I don't like him existing in the Marvel universe. The actor did a good job. His storyline is like, you feel for this guy who had been kept illegally by the government all those years, getting caught again, and just like the dealing with that trauma.
Yeah.
He portrays that well, but it's also like, this is not something for a lighthearted comic book universe.
Yeah. And I had a problem when they brought him in on Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because I do remember that when Sam and Bucky go to visit him, and I'm like, what's the point of this? Like, why are they? It kind of felt like a giant virtue signal, if I'm being honest.
Which is, from everything I've heard about Falcon and the Winter Soldier, sounds like a good description of that TV show.
Yeah.
The other funny thing is that they do try to emphasize just no, he's Captain America. Everyone calls him Cap. Okay, it's like Daniel, like we've had a long conversation here.
Yeah.
I haven't used your name more than 3 times probably in the last 50 minutes.
Yeah.
I would say, hey buddy, hey man, or just like, we know who is talking to who, because there are only 2 of us.
Yeah.
First 15 minutes or so of the movie, hey Cap, oh, it's Captain America. Hey, you aren't paying for this, you're Captain America. Hey Cap, what's the situation?
Oh, jeez. Yeah, so they had to really drive that point home that he was Captain America.
Right. And ultimately it's weird because it's like they make a big deal out of how he didn't take the super soldier serum, but he's functionally identical to someone who took the super soldier serum.
Yes, and he's somehow able to hold his own against Red Hulk.
Here's the thing. Holding his own against Red Hulk, if it had been like if he had been using his wings and maneuvering and everything, that would have been one thing. Like, that would have actually been a cool dynamic for a fight. Yeah. And they do have a fight where he and his sidekick, I have not mentioned until now, Joaquin, or Joaquin new
Yeah.
Falcon have to fight a couple of F-18 fighters. That was probably the best part of the movie, just because it felt like some nice superheroic action. If it had been Red Hulk versus a bobbing and weaving Falcon trying to distract them while they got some sort of anti-gamma ray super dingus in position,
Yeah.
I just emphasize like it kind of borrow Steve Rogers' "I could do this all day" thing, where it's like about just endurance and human spirit
Yeah.
versus unwavering strength. But I guess I didn't want to have to pay Harrison Ford for too much mocap work.
Yeah.
You can also tell that this thing was chopped up quite a bit. There's a scene with the leader where he just looks like he does not belong in the background he's in.
Oh.
And here's the thing: I tend not to notice that on my first go around with a movie.
Mm.
I'm sure there were lots of other shots that looked similarly chopped together.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, this movie was reshot at least twice.
yeah, like it's
Yeah.
just, and you could see element like apparently it was originally much more January 6th.
Mm.
They've taken anything politically interesting out of this. Like apparently the villains were originally going to be the Serpent Society. They are now a subplot.
Oh, yeah.
Um, they are basically just mercenaries hired by Stearns as. I wonder if the whole Red Hulk and leader thing was just stapled onto this movie because they were looking for a new ending.
Maybe. Yeah.
Also, there's this whole subplot about Ross trying to make sure that everybody gets access to the adamantium that's coming off of the Celestial. And his
Uh,
great rival is, of course, the mighty East Asian country of Japan. Look, you probably make more money off of Japan than China with these Marvel movies at this point.
yeah.
Choose who you're pandering to.
Yeah. Yeah. We know what you're doing.
Right. And and Japan doesn't make any sense as the country that would be pushing up against this. Like it's in the Indian Ocean. I don't think Japan has an expeditionary navy that's able to have. I don't think. I'd have to double check it, but
Yeah.
if Japan has aircraft carriers, I don't think they're aircraft carriers that are able to operate in the Indian Ocean.
Yeah. I thought they lost all of that after World War II.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that like the Japanese Air Force operates off the islands because why do you need it? If you're a defensive military force, why would you need aircraft carriers when you already have aircraft carriers called numerous tiny islands spread strategically around your homeland?
Yeah. Exactly. Oh. Yeah, ninja. Oh no, not the country whose big hero superhero team is Big Hero 6.
Man, I wish that a Big Hero 6 live action movie would have been much more interesting than this.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, this is really a Harrison Ford Thunderbolt Ross movie, which, truth be told, I had to be reminded that he has shown up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe since Incredible Hulk. Like, I know he's been in there a few times, but like he's not super memorable anytime.
Yeah, yeah, he just kind of shows up to it, and it's kind of hard to remember that too because he was played by William Hurt,
Right.
and yeah, because he was in he was in Civil War.
Yeah, like wasn't he responsible for the or involved with the Sokovia Accords?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
and he was I want to say he was like the Secretary of State in the movie, uh, and then he was in, very briefly in Infinity War and Black Widow.
Okay, so see, it's it's a story of redemption of a character I forgot had existed for like 15 years, even though I had seen him multiple times in the meantime.
Yeah.
And yet he's the emotional core of this movie, and he's the part that gets the closest to working.
Yeah.
Anything with Anthony Mackie, kind of flat.
Yeah.
Anything with what's his name from Big Bad or from Breaking Bad as this seeming super soldier, kind of lame. They shot on a green screen. Only interacts with Anthony Mackie.
Mm. Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
Joaquin, in a Marvel universe that has featured Aquafina, he is the worst, most like Aquafina in Shang-Chi had some scenes where I thought she was amusing.
Yeah.
Not one joke from this comic relief character actually landed as comic relief.
Oh, man.
Bucky shows up for one scene.
Yeah, isn't he running for Congress?
Yes, despite the fact that technically, if he's declared undead, I suppose that he would be eligible to run for his home district.
Yeah, but he's technically a war criminal.
But didn't he actually off JFK in the Marvel Universe?
He might have, yeah.
That man, George Santos has nothing on him when they start doing some digging into his background.
Yeah. Oh man. Ooh.
But he shows up for one scene, gives Falcon Cap a pep talk, then wanders off to be in the Thunderbolts, which looks like the more interesting movie, even though it's just another Guardians of the Galaxy / Suicide Squad type thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it could be good.
Yeah, this movie doesn't give me a lot of hope on that. Like,
yeah.
So overall, there are elements here that are good. I'd say the two. Oh, I forgot the Sabra character, who's just called Ruth the whole time. I understand that the actress had stunted growth due to a bout of childhood cancer, and good on her for recovering. And I don't want to make fun of anybody's physical appearance.
Yeah,
it's bad. It's bad policy in general, but especially when it's something they can't control.
Yeah.
But sorry, she looks like somebody's 12-year-old daughter has snuck into these scenes, but she's being portrayed as a Black Widow type character.
Yeah.
Should have just made her a mutant.
Yeah.
Like she was in the comics.
Yeah.
Then you could have had some cool special effects with her doing things.
Yeah, and they could easily do that. I mean, they've introduced adamantium in there, so you know that there are mutants.
And Ms. Marvel is technically their first mutant.
Yeah.
So you've popped that cork.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just when I said that I would watch any of the last dregs of the DC extended universe over this, I mean it. Because say what you will about the Flash has an emotional journey as a character. There are things that don't make sense, but there are some neat action scenes, even if the CGI is really dodgy in places. You have Michael Keaton as Batman. You have it feels like you just turn off the movie after he saves his dad in court, and nothing stupid really ruins the end of it.
Yeah. And hey Cengiz, good to see you.
Hey Cengiz.
DB did not care for it.
I'm wrapping it up now, but Blue Beetle told a complete story. The character had an arc. The powers shown off were kind of cool. Aquaman 2, oddly heartfelt, cared about being a continuation of the original. Good character work all around. Amber Heard was barely in it. This one, just like it's nothing. It's beige. They have mastered the art of comic book universes where you have stories that exist only because I'll tell you what this is. This is, hey, we had a Hulk comic that got canceled like 2 years ago, but now the writer of that Hulk comic is working on a Captain America comic, and he managed to sweet talk his editor into letting him finish up a storyline he had introduced in the Hulk comic 2 years ago. Even though the Captain America really has nothing to do with it, and the editor mandate says that he wasn't allowed to use Bruce Banner, so it makes even less sense. but darn it, he got his closure.
Yeah.
That's what this is. This is that weird comic book storyline where it's like, why is the Red Hulk the villain for a Sam Wilson Captain America movie? Because where else would you put it in the lineup? You already kind of were committed to a Captain America movie. We took out the January 6th an analog of the Serpent Society. We still kind of have President Ross as an angry, like I could see somebody making likening him to Trump.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's now a stretch because they've removed the balls from the movie.
Yeah.
So instead of being offensive and divisive, it's nothing. Hooray!
Yay!
And again, my dad is a good barometer for these things. He thought it was merely okay when he had positive things to say about the Marvels, and he thought there were interesting things there.
Oh, wow.
Like here's the thing, he was a big, like he's a lifelong comic book guy like me.
Yeah.
More than me. He reads more comics than I do. So like he is very he is more forgiving of it than I am, just because he likes to, he likes seeing new twists on the characters and things and storylines that he read years ago brought to life. Even he was kind of lukewarm on this thing.
Yeah. Wow.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's worse than the Flash.
Ooh. Yeah. And I'm kind of curious to watch it just to see if it's worse than the Eternals.
I've heard split opinions on that one.
Because
like the Eternals had flavor at least. Beige. This is beige. This is plain oatmeal made with water instead of milk. This
man.
Yeah, you know what? We've pounded this movie into the ground.
Yes.
I think I'm yabba dabba done with it.
Yeah. Yabba dabba doo. The Flintstones.
The Flintstones live action movie from 1994.
Yes.
I remember seeing this in theaters.
I didn't see it in the theaters. I watched it when it came out on video. I think where I was living at the time, it wasn't showing in any of the theaters for some reason.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, were you were you in Alabama? We don't like it because it encourages the theory of evolution.
Not Alabama, but I was in Wyoming, so that might have had something to do with it.
Which is funny because the Simpsons is clearly a creationist work that has humans and dinosaurs living alongside with each other.
Yes.
It has episodes featuring Christmas, despite the fact that
it's a few thousand years before the birth of Christ.
Yeah. Anyway, so the Flintstones live action movie, I think this might be one of the most earnest attempts at bringing a cartoon to live action I've ever seen.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, because they did a great job of creating bedrock, of building bedrock, actually building the structures and and building all the cars and having all of the actors look like the characters. I mean, they're pretty accurate to their depictions.
Yeah. So this was an Amblin Entertainment joint. Let's see here. Who all does it star?
We got John Goodman as
Thank
Fred
you. I
Flintstone.
could not think of John Goodman for some reason.
Yeah, who apparently he hated doing this movie because a lot of it was because of his haircut. He's like, I've spent the last 6 months with my haircut like this.
Oh,
yeah, apparently, I think he only did it as a favor to Steven Spielberg.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't remember that episode, Changus. Although it's been a while since I've Billy and Mandy. It's Billy. I haven't heard of Billy and Mandy.
That was a 2000s Cartoon Network show. What's he saying about Billy and Mandy?
He said they unfroze Fred.
No, but that sounds interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you have Elizabeth Perkins playing Wilma. And then you've got Rick Moranis as Barney Rubble, and then Rosie O'Donnell as Betty Rubble, which I probably really bad casting, if I'm being honest. Because because a lot of people, for a lot of kids, their first crush was Betty Rubble, and doesn't really fit.
See, I thought she was cute enough.
Yeah.
One thing that watching this in 4K made me realize is that poor Rosie, like she was walking around in that sleeveless dress outside a bunch, and you could see her like her shoulders were just freckled and covered in sunburns and peeling skin in a lot of shots. It's like, man, what are they doing to that poor woman?
Yeah, yeah. Get her some sunscreen. Yeah.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And then and I thought Moranis was decent enough as Barney Rubble. I mean, I will say they all got the voices right.
Hmm.
And I think the only reason the big reason Rosie was cast was because she could do the laugh, the little giggle. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Um,
So it occurs to me, let's take a step back.
yeah.
If you're too young to remember, the Flintstones was like it was the original primetime animated show.
Mhm.
It was the how to put it. It was the unsuccessful goal for many, many years until The Simpsons came out to recreate what the Flintstones was for adult animation. Like
Yeah.
the Jetsons started off as an attempt to like, well, what if we did the Flintstones, but it's the future? And
Yeah.
it was a flop its first season until they revived it in the 80s and put it on Saturday morning where it always belonged. And then it was a success.
Yes. Yeah. 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 The Flintstones was basically like the Honeymooners, but in cartoon form and in prehistoric times.
Yeah. And it was like we're still living with the shadow of the Flintstones today. Homer Simpson is very much a Fred Flintstone-esque character,
Yeah.
as is Peter Griffin for that matter.
Mm.
Just I think they're dumber than Fred ever was, which we'll get into a second when we talk about the actual movie. But
Yeah.
um, you can still get Flintstones chewable vitamins. They still have Cocoa Pebbles
Yeah. Yeah. And Fruity Pebbles.
and Fruity
Yeah.
Pebbles and whatever seasonal pebbles they decide to roll out.
Yeah. Yeah. And you still see the Flintstones every now and then pop up, and references in pop culture, and you might even you can, I think you can watch the old episodes on Max or Peacock or wherever.
Maybe Max. They're probably also for free somewhere too. But
Yeah.
like Flintstones were a big deal, and they weren't just a big deal in the '60s during the initial run of the show. Hanna-Barbera had a stranglehold on American animation up through the '80s when they started getting some real competition from things like Transformers or whatever. When they finally broke down the laws against having cartoons basically be glorified toy commercials, at which point you could actually afford to put some better animation into it than Hanna-Barbera historically did.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's very true.
like the Flintstones, they had lots of spin-offs and
Mhm.
sequels and other like Saturday morning stuff that was honestly kind of forgettable. But that original run just deeply embedded in people's minds. As I recall, the theme songs, yeah, the Flintstones had two different theme songs over time.
Yeah.
They were like chart toppers. They had The Man Called Flintstone, which I want to say had a theatrical release of some sort, which was like a spy parody thing that I think I reviewed for the channel a few years back.
Yeah. It sounds familiar. Yeah.
They like the Flintstones were everywhere, and the Flintstones got like a second burst of life in the '90s. Like they even had a Flintstones kids cartoon when I was growing up, part of like the
Yeah.
pup named Scooby Doo and other things.
Yeah. I remember that, and I think they had like a Flintstones kids series too, where like
Yeah, yeah,
where
like,
all the characters were little kids.
right. That's what I was referring to. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And this movie was like a big shot in the arm. And this was a big movie for that year. Like 350 million in 1994 dollars was nothing to sneeze at.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I remember there was a lot of hype around the movie too before it came out. I mean, you had all of these companies doing promotional tie-ins. I know McDonald's had a big
Oh
Big
yeah.
promotion going on.
So if you're like my family and you still have one of those horn flask glasses,
Yeah.
apparently you shouldn't drink from it anymore because it's kind of gone toxic.
Oh.
I think that inspired my parents to recycle the one that they'd had since we saw this movie.
Oh. Oh. Well, okay.
That's your public service announcement to at least fact check me.
Yes. Yeah. 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 And they had an action figure line too. I remember
Yeah.
seeing those at Toys R Us.
Probably the most creative one I had was they had a 3D comic available for this movie that told the storyline, and it wasn't like normal 3D effects. It was like if you closed one eye, you would see the characters drawn like the actors. If you closed the other eye, you would see everyone look like the cartoon version.
Yeah, and I think I had one. I think I had that too. Um, yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah.
So I guess what I'll say is that I actually have a hard time judging this on its own merits because it is rooted deep in my psyche. Like
Yeah.
as the movie was playing, I was like, "Oh, and then this will happen, and then this will happen, and then this will happen."
Yeah. uh, well, I will say in my case, like there was actually a lot about this movie I forgot. I remember kind of the basic beats of the story, but like there are a lot of like the jokes and everything, and some of the things that happened in the movie that just I completely it didn't remember or misremembered. And because like I mean I hadn't seen this movie in like 30 years, and I think I only watched it like once or twice. Um, and I think that was because maybe because my mom and dad didn't like it, which even though they both loved the cartoon show, they watched the cartoon when they were kids. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, but yeah, I mean, it was better than I remembered it being. And of course, it's I think from the outside looking in, a lot of people will look at it and go, "Oh, this looks really silly," because they look like the cartoon. But that's kind of the point of the movie. Like
Right.
it's
Like
supposed to be that way.
what you wanted them to modern audienceify it up. You
Yeah.
you wanted them to make it a dark, gritty, realistic take on cavemen that just happens to be called the Flintstones.
Oh. I don't think anyone would see that movie.
Exactly. So it's like, what's the alternative besides it looking silly?
Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, I guess we should get to the plot of the movie,
I I,
which
I guess we should.
yeah,
It almost feels like we've reviewed it, but it's
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
yeah. So like I mentioned earlier that Fred usually seemed like he was smarter than Homer or Peter Griffin.
Yeah,
Um, so the core premise of this movie is that Fred is kind of a simpleton.
yeah. Which it's been a while since I watched the cartoon show, so I can't really recall just how stupid Fred was. But yeah, this movie, yeah, he's really dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the plot of the movie, which it kind of has like an adult plot. So um you got two new characters in the movie. And I'm pulling up the IMDb here real quick, so I don't. One of them
What?
is played by Kyle MacLachlan, who most people remember from a lot of David Lynch's movies. And then his secretary, who's played by Halle Berry, and her name is name of her character is Sharon Stone. Uh, and
Which is exactly the sort of prehistoric themed punnery that the show is known for.
oh yes, yeah, like the beginning of the movie, they go into the drive-in and they see George Lucas presents Star Wars.
Coming soon, George Lucas presents Star Wars.
Yes. Yeah, and so yeah, Kyle MacLachlan plays Cliff Vandercave, and he works at he's an executive at Slate, the Slate Company, that's the mining company where Fred and Barney work. And he and Sharon Stone, Halle Berry, they've come up with they're a scheme to embezzle a bunch of money from the company, and but they need a patsy, they need a putz to take the fall for them, and then they have this so they have all the quarry the mining workers take this test so that they can become an executive, and uh, Fred and of course Fred and Barney are studying for it really hard, and of course Barney and Betty have just adopted Bam Bam.
Thanks to Fred's financial aid.
Yes, yeah, and so they're taking this test, and of course Fred just bombs it hard. Which having been a student at one point, taking a class where I do absolutely nothing, had no idea what anyone was talking about. I know the feeling, and so Barney goes and turns the test in, but then he sees that Fred just really bombed, just did a horrible job. So to pay Fred back for the financial aid to help them adopt Bam Bam, Barney swaps tests with Fred, and as it just so happens, Barney got the highest score on the test, and Fred got the lowest.
Yep. So Barney gets fired, and Fred becomes an executive.
Yes, and then and as he's an executive, the bad guy Cliff, he's making Fred sign off on all these things, and of course Fred has absolutely no idea what he's signing.
Doesn't read a thing.
Yeah, doesn't read a thing. But and then but of course despite that he's getting these get a hefty pay raise and promotion, and so now he and Wilmer are living the high life. They're buying these fancy cars, and they get a hot tub, and then a second story on the house.
And the rebels are reduced to living with them.
Yeah.
All the while, Barney is just simmering, knowing that Fred is basically living his life.
Yeah.
And I think that storyline is probably what puts a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths about this movie. Okay.
Yeah.
Because if I take a step back from, again, this movie being rooted deep in my childhood psyche, like I'm sympathetic with the writers having to come up with something that's more sophisticated than a usual 24 minutes Flintstones television plot, right?
Right.
It's kind of the problem that they had with the Simpsons movie, which is, okay, what do we do for an hour and a half?
Yeah. Yeah. You almost have to write. You almost have to write a story arc for 3 episodes, and that's your movie.
Right. And it's and so the characters are kind of, is mean-spirited the right way to put it? At least the situation is mean-spirited.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and Fred kind of has that. You mentioned Peter Griffin, or Peter, where he's whenever Peter gets any kind of success in his job, it really goes to his head, and he becomes a jerk, and we kind of see that with Fred. Yeah.
Right. And at one point, when a bunch of factory people or a bunch of people at the Slate's quarry are laid off, they speak openly about lynching Fred and Barney.
They even get the rope and the noose. Yeah. It's like, what?
Yeah. What was the line I called out in that scene I thought was pretty clever?
I remember it. Yeah, it was what was it? It was
that's right. I've been framed. In a minute, you'll be in a box.
Yeah. I want to say that was Jonathan Winters who said that line.
Yeah. Okay. That's who that was. I thought he looked familiar.
Yeah.
But so it's like that is a weird plot line to have for the Flintstones. But I also get it because you have to have some sort of stakes to carry an hour and a half movie.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, Ninja points that sounds like an adult comedy plot as opposed to a Flintstones plot. Kind of, yeah.
Yeah,
And
it
they,
also
yeah,
involves
they're,
a lot of business stuff that the kids might not find very interesting.
yeah, and of course there's the very awkward scenes with Fred and Halle Berry where there's like a little innuendo going on, and there's a lot
Right.
of and then Wilma walks in on them and like, oh,
Right. It's honestly, they didn't I could actually see that happening on the Flintstones,
yeah,
like as like low grade flirty as it was,
yeah,
but still just there's elements here that, but again, I'm trying to think of my alternative, and it's like, well, one thing they could have done would be to have them travel somewhere else, but then you lose the fun of making bedrock and exploring bedrock.
yeah, yeah. Well, it probably would have saved them probably saved money on the budget, but no,
Well,
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah,
anywhere else they would have gone, they would have had to bedrockify it.
right, yeah, yeah,
That's actually one of the fun things that a man called Flintstone is like. They basically have a Flintstones version of Paris that they go to at one point, and I want to say Istanbul or somewhere else in like Middle East or North Africa. That's Flintstones eyes. Like they were very creative with that.
oh yeah, yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
so on that level, it's like okay, maybe the plot line is a little bit dark for what the Flintstones usually is.
yeah.
I can again see why the writers would decide to go that way, just because of the needs to fill an hour and a half. Like you can't just have it be all kid friendly fluff. Mind you,
Yeah.
there are still some scenes like that. Like oh no, there's a pterosaur coming to town, and everybody screams and runs inside, and then a car just gets bombed
Yeah.
with pterosaur droppings.
Yeah. Uh,
Um, so let's talk about the. So we kind of talked about the negatives here, which is that the storyline, and also I would say that if you had never seen an episode of the cartoon before, I could see somebody getting very confused by this
yeah, yeah.
because it is such a love letter to that show that
Yeah. Yeah, um yeah, I mean and you talk about nostalgia bait. I mean, this was
yeah,
nostalgia bait before nostalgia bait. I mean, because they not only did they recreate all of the bedrock and everything, but they had all the same like quirks and foibles. You had like you
yep,
know Dino, a very poor CGI Dino tackling Fred, and they even do the opening sequence, the yabba dabba doo, and the
yeah,
yeah
down to
then
the beat.
yes, and they even have Betty and Wilma doing the charge it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's just like it's so in keeping with what it was. Like this thing loves the Flintstones, and maybe just after so many remakes that we've reviewed over time, where it's like, okay, you were embarrassed about being a comic book movie, or okay, you didn't really want to do a Ninja Turtle story.
Yeah.
It was just kind of refreshing to watch something that just was, you know what, John Q. Public, you are here because you like the Flintstones, and you're going to get all the Flintstones we can cram into an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So I can understand why this thing has a 5.0 on IMDb, because
Yeah.
like it is a movie that is like it is there because you love the Flintstones already. It is not necessarily here to convert you. It is here to like give you those member berries and tingles and uh, and happy memories.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Yeah, it succeeds on that front. Yeah.
Right. You can just take issue with the nature of the storyline.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another thing I'll say is that watching it with easy access to a pause button, which I didn't necessarily have as a kid, because I
Mm.
think it was a while before we had a TV with a remote control.
Oh.
At least like, or maybe like you know what I mean, like a lot of controlling of the TV via the buttons on the VCR or the TV itself.
Right. Yeah. 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 I remember a lot of the early VCRs. Yeah, they didn't have remotes. You actually had
Yeah,
to get up and pause it or stop it.
right.
Yeah.
So now that you can watch it on Netflix, I would say if you decide to give this a try, have your pause button ready, because every time they throw up a newspaper or a test or you have something in the background, there's a lot of like funny little in jokes there. Like
Oh yeah, yeah.
my favorite probably was pterodactyl with soccer team crashes in Andes, each soccer team to survive.
They put that in a kids movie.
That is a blink and you miss it moment. That is something
Yeah.
that the writers of The Simpsons would talk about doing, because they knew that certain types of people would record every episode and be ready to freeze frame anything that they put up there.
Yeah. Yeah, and on the newspapers too, they the pictures of Fred are from the cartoon show.
Yeah, that was a funny detail too. Like anytime they're portrayed in art, it's always like cartoon style.
Yeah.
Which is just another thing. Like if you didn't know that this was a cartoon, you'd be like, what the hell is Fred looking like that for?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that if you have fond memories of the Flintstones, like this is worth a watch just because it'll activate your memories. If you've
Yeah.
never watched the Flintstones before, just go watch some episodes of the Flintstones. Like maybe
Yeah.
not the pilot, because pilots are always awkward, but just like go find a list of top 10 Flintstones episodes and give them a watch.
Yeah. Yeah, they're episodic, so you don't have to like watch them in order.
Oh, that was the other thing, was that Fred was like weirdly stupid in this movie. Like
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's been a while since I watched it, but I felt like he was dumber than Homer Simpson sometimes here.
Oh yeah.
Although the cartoon could also be very inconsistent, because I distinctly remember one time when I was a kid watching 2 episodes back to back, and in one, Fred was a god tier bowler who everybody admired, and in another, he was seen as the world's worst bowler, and he was always like hitting the pins in someone else's lane. Like the people at the Buffalo Lodge like had no respect for him, and it's like, wait a minute. Even as like a kid, I was like, wait a minute.
Wait a minute. What's yeah. Yeah. But yeah, check it out if you want to revisit it, or if you haven't seen it before. It's on Netflix.
Yep.
Well, I think we've said all we need to say for tonight.
Indeed.
Thank you everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it as always. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, ring the bell, buy some comic books. Link is in the description down below.
Indeed.
Yeah. And we'll see you next week. Night, everybody.
Night, everyone.